Optimistic beats, optimistic beats,
citizens of the world. The magnitude of their attacks now today are mind-bending, and much is not known to the public, so we will expose 9/11 once and for all. We are anonymous. This is the full 9/11 documentary evidence of use of directed energy weapons at WTC. 1. Seismic record. The energy budget recorded in the seismic record on the day of 9/11 and the collapse of the WTC buildings did not reflect the massive building materials involved in the collapse, nor the nearly free fall of the collapsing buildings. The seismic record demonstrates an event on the scale of a quarry blast. Where was the thud that would have accompanied a WTC building collapse? 2. Kinetic energy. 2 robust WTC buildings with very robust steel beam reinforcement would release a sizable amount of kinetic energy from their buildings falling. That would be all of the energy that went into the construction of the WTC buildings. The release of that amount of kinetic energy is not reflected in the physical evidence on the seismic record. Into what physical process did that kinetic energy go? 3. Molecular dissociation. The collapse of the WTC buildings produced the highest mass per volume of very fine particles, nanoparticles, ever measured in an air sample in the United States. It takes a tremendous amount of energy to dissociate or break the molecular bonds of steel, concrete and other building materials that were powdered into very fine particles during the collapse of the buildings. The largest mass per volume of metals ever measured in an air sample in the US were reported by Dr. Thomas Cahill, who did air monitoring for 5 months. Metal is used in buildings because it is very strong, and would require large amounts of energy to reduce it to nanoparticles. Chemical explosives do not release enough energy to produce that volume of very fine particles. A much more energetic process was involved, such as laser or beam energy, which releases focused and concentrated energy as complex waveforms, necessary to cause molecular dissociation. 4. Physical evidence of buildings collapsing. In videos of the collapses on the 11th of September, the WTC buildings erupted into emulsion like a drinking fountain, and the rubble did not hit the ground. Even on tape, huge pieces of aluminium building siding vaporized as they were free falling, and never hit the ground. 5. Controlled demolition. Their collapse of the WTC buildings was not a controlled demolition for the following reasons. WTC detritus pile should have been 1/3 the height of the WTC buildings. The 100-plus story WTC buildings were about 1 story high when the collapse of the buildings ended. A fireman on one of the news videos said the antenna that had been on the top of WTC building 1 was on the top of a pile of rubble about 1 story high. Their rubble pile should have been 35 stories if it was a conventional controlled demolition. WTC rubble never hit the ground. This defies gravity. Where did the rubble go? Footprints. Geometrically round holes. Contiguous round holes 24 in diameter were in the footprints of the WTC buildings 1 and 2, and a 60 deep geometrically round hole was in the middle of Liberty Street near the WTC. This is evidence of beam weapons. There was no debris inside the footprints of the two WTC buildings, only bare dirt with circles in the dirt. Dust. In videos of the collapse, larger particles fell and cascaded down from the buildings under the forces of gravity, but before they hit the ground they vaporized and suddenly went up into the atmosphere like an anti-gravity demonstration. Nanoparticles are so tiny that they are not subject to the forces of gravity, so molecular dissociation occurred on the larger particles as they were free falling, reducing them into nanoparticles, 0.1 microns in diameter and smaller, that suddenly obeyed other physical laws of quantum mechanics. More evidence of directed energy weapon or HARP beam weapon technology applied during collapse. 9/11 satellite photos. 9/11 satellite photographs showed dust going into upper atmosphere which had to be nanoparticles and may have been enhanced by other technology because most very fine particles, dust would stay in the troposphere and be rained out in 2 months, as we know from depleted uranium particulate releases from battlefield already. 1,400 toasted cars, located blocks from the WTC buildings, with door handles missing, engine blocks missing, blistering on some parts of the car finish, strange rust patterns on the bodies of the cars. Paper around cars not burned, whatever vaporized the engine blocks and the door handles on 1,400 cars did not ignite. Fragile and flammable paper lying all over the ground around the cars. If engine blocks and door handles selectively vaporized, why didn't body of car vaporize? Pile of cars spontaneously combusted. In a news video, the entire pile of cars started burning spontaneously at the same time with no visible cause. It was not a fire that started in one car and spread to others. Rust occurred immediately, on cars and trucks, and in FEMA photos there was heavy rust on steel beams. Steel does not rust, and it is a slow oxidation process that results in rusting of iron. This rusting happened immediately. Basements of WTC buildings undamaged. Stuffed mannequins in the basement of WTC with clothing on were carried out of the basement undamaged. If a 100-plus story WTC building collapsed into its basement and left a 35-story rubble pile, there would be nothing left in the basement. Even streetcars underground at the WTC were pulled out after the collapse and had no damage. Professor Cahill monitoring samples, the hardest and most durable materials vaporized, steel, concrete etc., and the most fragile materials, paper, cascading out of WTC windows and all over the ground for blocks were undamaged. Truckloads of potting soil. Right after the WTC disaster, the ground was fuming, and sequential FEMA and aerial photos show 130 dump trucks full of soil, filled almost to the top of the dump truck space, covered with tarps so that the dirt in the trucks was not visible to onlookers on the street, coming into the WTC area, dumping the soil and going out for more. This happened even before the rescues or cleanup started, and it continued for some time. The piles of soil were left for a week and got higher each day in sequential photos. The soil fuming lasted until March 2002, 8 months. Boots disintegrated. Boots on emergency responders disintegrated after 2 hours. They had to get new boots every 2 hours, an effect of molecular dissociation. It was not from burning, their skin would have been damaged. No ground fuming during rain. For 99 days the burning, fuming, continued at the WTC site, but when it rained there was no fuming. If it had been fires burning, the rain would have caused steam from heating rainwater. USGS, iron versus steel. The USGS analyzed the mineral form of the rust on steel beams and iron objects at the WTC. They did not address the steel does not rust issue, but dodged it by referring to the rusted steel beams in the rubble pile as iron beams and gave mineral analyses of iron minerals produced by oxidation. Official sample data not reliable. Spectral absorption images at the WTC indicated average particle size was about 1 micron, which is subjected to gravity and would have fallen with the collapsed buildings. USGS did not collect many dust samples, and collecting samples by other different agencies did not agree with each other. No samples were taken at the toasted cars. Directed energy weapon evidence. Evidence of use of a directed energy weapon was present at the top of the WTC buildings as lathering up started before buildings started coming down. Lathering up in videos preceded the collapse of all buildings, even Building 7, which supposedly Larry Silverstein, when he said, "Pull it to firefighters," meant controlled demolition, color alteration and modification in news videos compared to other photos. Videos of tops of buildings indicates doctoring of images. When the Seattle Dome was destroyed with controlled demolition, the dust created by the destruction did not get any higher than the top of the building. The WTC dust got into the upper atmosphere almost immediately, which indicates very tiny atmospheric dust-sized particles, 0.1 micron and smaller, in fact smaller than atmospheric dust that stays mainly in the troposphere. Lathering up incriminating. WTC Building 7 lathered up even before WTC Building 2 went down. WTC Building 7 not damaged at all by WTC Building 2 going down, right next to each other. Freon tanks. Very odd, large tanks were removed from WTC Building and offshore made bogus statement about what and why they were removed. Was Freon used in WTC takedown? A NYC cop whom the researcher met with Cindy Sheehan said he was injured in WTC Building 7 and removed on a gurney, but his eyes were covered so he could not see anything as they left the building. He reported he was able to see dead bodies lying all over the floor as he was being carried out, before Building 7 had collapsed. Was this due to Freon asphyxiation put through ventilation system like in a recent Russian submarine disaster? 9/11 witness evidence of use of directed energy weapons at WTC. Where were all the WTC bodies? Emergency room physicians Dr. Tony Dare and Dr. Lincoln Cleaver were interviewed on TV on the 11th of September about the casualties. They said there weren't any casualties after about noon on the 11th of September. No more casualties came to the emergency room. Firemen saw no bodies but talked about the antenna on top of Building 1 that was at ground level on top of about 1 story of rubble. No fires in buildings. William Rodriguez, senior janitor at WTC, said there were no fires in the buildings. He conducted rescue efforts, saved injured workers and hid keys to every lock in both buildings. Livermore, nuclear weapons lab in weapon demonstration. In 1955 the microwave oven was invented and was a concept for a beam weapon. In the summer of 1990, the researcher observed a demonstration of the Livermore Shiva laser facility in the middle of the night. A 16-diameter amber-colored beam was shot straight up into the sky from the lab and all air traffic was diverted for a 5-mile radius during their demonstration. When the researcher asked a grad student working at the laser facility what they were trying to do, he said, "Make a star." The researcher knew that could not be true because lasers are used to molecularly dissociate materials by releasing tremendous amounts of energy as very advanced and complex waveforms. Livermore had long been involved in development of HAARP, a directed energy weapon, since 1978 in secret collaboration with the Soviet Union, and advanced beam weapons. Minneapolis bridge collapse, August 1, 2007, the researcher states, similarities to WTC disaster, every bridge segment, in the August 1, 2007 Minneapolis bridge collapse, failed at exactly the same time instead of domino effect after first collapse. This defies the laws of engineering. It should have been one place failed and sequential domino-like failures followed for a normal engineering collapse. What are the implications of the evidentiary conclusion that an advanced directed energy weapon was used in 9/11? 1. Documentary and witness evidence. The documentary and witness evidence presented by Dr. Judy Wood and other researchers is sufficient to conclude, by the laws of evidence, that it is more probable than not that an advanced directed energy weapon was used on the World Trade Center buildings on September 11, 2001. 2. False flag operation. The use of an advanced directed energy weapon in 9/11 demonstrates beyond a reasonable doubt that 9/11 was a false flag operation. If an advanced directed energy weapon had been used by an overt foreign enemy of the United States upon U.S. soil, the World Trade Center, the U.S. military would have used every possible means to retaliate against any foreign enemy that used such an advanced directed energy weapon. 3. Public notice. There is ample notice on the public record of Dr. Judy Wood's evidence regarding the use of directed energy weapons at the World Trade Center buildings on the 11th of September. Starting in March 16, 2007, Dr. Judy Wood has pursued requests for correction with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, regarding evidence for directed energy weapons. Dr. Wood filed a key TAM action filed at the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. A writ of certiorari was filed in this matter in the Supreme Court of the United States on October 14, 2009 and was recently dismissed by the U.S. Supreme Court. 4. Deemed official notice. The U.S. Department of Justice or a prosecutor before a U.S. military commission that is prosecuting the defendants in United States v. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed et al. Can be reasonably deemed to have notice of the evidence that directed energy weapons were used against the World Trade Center on September 11, 2001. This evidence is contained in Dr. Wood's proceedings at National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, and her key TAM action U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York, and the U.S. Supreme Court. Dr. Judy Wood's evidence is of public importance in the question of a trial of the alleged masterminds of 9/11 in which capital punishment may result. 5. Political show trial. Regardless of ultimate judicial venue, U.S. Federal Court or U.S. Military Commission, if the trial of the defendants in United States v. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed et al. Proceeds without the Department of Justice prosecutors, the U.S. Attorney, the U.S. President, the U.S. Federal Court or Military Commission, or the defense attorneys having weighed the evidence of directed energy weapons having been used in the World Trade Center, then a major miscarriage of justice will have taken place. It can be reasonably concluded that the trial, in the matter of United States v. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed et al., is a political show trial and continued psychological operation, as was the original false flag operation of September 11, 2001. The term show trial is a pejorative description of a type of highly public trial. The term was first recorded in the 1930s. There is a strong connotation that the judicial authorities have already determined the guilt of the defendant and that the actual trial has as its only goal to present the accusation and the verdict to the public as an impressive example and as a warning. Show trials tend to be retributive rather than correctional justice. Such trials can exhibit scant regard for the principles of jurisprudence and even for the letter of the law. Defendants have little real opportunity to justify themselves. They have often signed statements under duress and or suffered torture prior to appearing in the courtroom. 6. Use of secret quantum access time travel technologies. The eyewitness evidence of Cambridge-educated environmentalist and lawyer Andrew D. Basiago that a secret DARPA time travel program had physical possession as early as 1971 of images of the events at the World Trade Center buildings on the 11th of September, 30 years in advance of the event, must now be evaluated with the evidence of Dr. Judy Wood and other researchers that directed energy weapons were used at the World Trade Center buildings on the 11th of September, both of secret time travel and teleportation technologies and directed energy weapons are among the most secret and the most advanced technologies in their arsenal of DARPA and the U.S. Department of Defense. The fact that a 9/11 connection has been established for both secret time travel and teleportation technologies and directed energy weapons around one individual of cabinet rank in both 1971 and 2001 is of high evidentiary importance. by the evidence, that individual is Donald H. Rumsfeld, defense liaison to DARPA's secret time travel program, and a member of U.S. President Richard M. Nixon's cabinet in 1971, and 30 years later, U.S. Secretary of Defense on September 11, 2001 with line authority over advanced directed energy weapons of the U.S. government. 7. Treason or misprision of treason. The next article in this multi-part series on secret technologies and 9/11 will explore the reasonable prima facie evidence for the criminal indictment and trial for treason. Article 3(3) of the U.S. Constitution, or misprision of treason, U.S. Code 18, Sec. 2382, of then-sitting U.S. President George W. Bush, Vice President Richard B. Cheney, U.S. Secretary of Defense Donald H. Rumsfeld. We are anonymous. We are legion. We are many. We are everywhere. United as one. Divided by zero. Expect the unexpected.